What's up, everyone? So 300 Bitcoin basically lands in Ross Ulbricht's donation wallet on May 31st, I think it was, which is like 31 million in a single transaction. And immediately we see the blockchain analytics companies or industry in general just start spinning theories about where it came from, which was really kind of funny to watch. But Chainalysis put out their claim. They say the money's from AlphaBay, supposedly traced to addresses from 2016 and 2017. They want everyone to believe this is darknet vendor money from AlphaBay, which, for those of you that don't know, is a major or was a major darknet market before the feds actually shut it down in 2017. The issue here is that to some degree, Chainalysis has kind of a credibility problem. Their head of investigations, Elizabeth Bisbee, admitted under oath in federal court that she was unaware of any scientific evidence for the accuracy of their reactor software, which means things like having no error rates, peer reviews, or any kind of published validation studies actually exist. When asked how they verify accuracy, she said that they use customer feedback. Now, mind you, the feds use them all the time. If they get a conviction, I'm sure the feedback is pretty good, right? Like, basically, the software putting people in prison is validated by customer satisfaction surveys, which predominantly for criminal cases are going to be law enforcement. Absolutely no conflict of interest there, right? In the Bitcoin fog case, CipherTrace, competing blockchain analysis firm, found that Chainalysis had a 64% discrepancy inaccuracy for their behavioral clustering heuristics. CipherTrace's director of investigations said that there were, quote, hundreds of millions of data points that are unverified in Chainalysis' system. They also misidentified mixer usage as a simple peel chain in the dark side Colonial Pipeline ransomware case, which sent investigators down completely wrong paths about where the 90 million in ransomware funds actually went. Tor Eklund, the defense attorney in the Bitcoin fog case, called Chainalysis the theranos of blockchain forensics. When a company claims their software can definitively trace cryptocurrency, but admits that they have zero scientific validation, that comparison starts to look not so accurate, right? Yet, courts keep accepting their testimonies and media outlets report their theories as fact much of the time. In this case, it's Wired that's actually doing this. So let's look at what the blockchain actually shows, courtesy of Zach XBT on X, who does his analysis in public where everyone can verify it and see it. The donor used Jambler to obscure the source of the actual funds. Now, Jambler is a centralized mixing service, the kind that normal privacy enthusiasts absolutely won't touch, because centralized services, as people in the know, keep logs, they store user data, and they hand everything over to law enforcement when they show up with a warrant. So real privacy advocates tend to use things like decentralized options that don't have central points of failure. Zach XBT found the smoking gun through careful timing analysis. Two addresses, one MP and one CN, were depositing Bitcoin into Jambler at the exact same time the donor was actually withdrawing their 300 BTC. The one MP address has a particularly interesting history. It shows exchange activity from late 2014. Now, mind you, at or around December 22nd, in 2014 is when the original AlphaBay actually opened up its doors, while being shut down in 2017. Alpha02, the admin, was actually arrested on July 5th of 2017. Of course, the version 2 was relaunched by DSnake in August of 2021 and went until it shut down in February of 2023, supposedly due to AlphaGuard, which was the script that terminated the site with a self-destruct sequence should DSnake fail to disable it. Now, I hate 2.0 markets, meaning markets that are rebrands or like relaunches. They tend to ride on the coattails of someone else better than them, and they always do fairly poorly in this regard. Both addresses were actually dormant since November of 2019, holding Bitcoin from when it was worth like $7,000 all the way through the peak at 69,000. Then suddenly in April 2025, they wake up to facilitate this miraculous donation. Someone sat on these coins for over 5 years watching them appreciate. Phil Laird from Chainalysis told the media they have reasonable grounds to suspect these funds originated in AlphaBay. But when you look at the actual blockchain evidence and the use of Jambler instead of privacy-focused tools, their theory tends to look more like speculation that they kind of amped up to be some kind of analysis, which they don't even tell us how they actually performed. Now, the choice of Jambler reveals amateur hour operational security as far as that goes. Centralized mixers are some of the worst possible choices for anyone that's actually trying to maintain privacy or anonymity, and that's because they create a single point of failure. Every major centralized mixer in some way has been compromised by law enforcement, and their users typically discovered this years later when the handcuffs actually came out. And I even did a whole video on how the feds took over and ran one of these for over a year. Now, Bitcoin Fog was another one that ran for a decade before Roman Sterlingoff got arrested. The IRS traced him through Liberty Reserve payments that he made for server hosting back in 2011. 10 years of thinking he was safe, basically. Then federal agents showed up with a complete transactional history. Best Mixer thought they were untouchable until Dutch law enforcement seized their servers in 2019 with all logs intact. ChipMixer processed 3 billion over its entire lifespan. And in March of 2023, authorities seized everything, including 46 million in cryptocurrency and enough data to prosecute users for years. And Samourai lasted until April 2024, when the founders got arrested after processing 2 billion, with investigators tracing 100 million directly to darknet markets. Now, all of that gives us a really clear pattern, which is centralized services create records, law enforcement seizes those records, and everyone who thought they were anonymous, or were trying to be anyway, basically gets prosecuted based on transactions from the past, like earlier years, basically. The blockchain is permanent evidence. Like, what you thought was clever mixing in 2019 becomes tomorrow's federal indictment, which brings us to why the entire operation was completely unnecessary to begin with. Monero exists, like specifically to solve Bitcoin's transparency problems. With this announcement, there were people actually complaining about things like privacy violations from the blockchain analysis. Like, people on X really saying that looking at a blockchain is a violation of Ross's privacy, which is one of the dumbest things that I've heard in a while. Now, this moron is missing the point. As Monero Bull said, don't use a transparent ledger and then complain about privacy violations when people find your wallet. 100%. One of the best comments in that thread. Chainalysis exists precisely because Bitcoin is transparent and because morons keep using it for illegal transactions. Like, Monero works fundamentally different. Ring signatures hide the real sender among multiple decoy inputs, typically 16 possible signers per transaction. Ring CT, or Ring confidential transactions, encrypts the amounts so that nobody can see how much was sent. Stealth addresses mean the recipient's actual address never appears on the blockchain. When you look at Monero's blockchain, you see that transactions exist, but you can't determine who sent what to whom or how much. If this donor actually cared about operational security, they would have converted their Bitcoin to Monero on a non-KYC exchange and sent the XMR through the Monero network, where it becomes untraceable. then had someone else convert it back to Bitcoin for Ross because he's such a proponent of Bitcoin, which to me is insanity. But the final Bitcoin donation basically would have appeared with no traceable history. Instead, they chose the most surveilled path possible. You really can't make this up. Life is far stranger than fiction. The Mixer services that you trust today will be tomorrow's law enforcement databases. Your operational security is only as good as the weakest link in your chain. For privacy advocates that are upset about blockchain analysis, you're using the wrong tool. Like, Bitcoin was designed to be transparent. Every transaction's public by design. If you want privacy, use protocols built for privacy and have it by default like Monero, not transparent systems with mixing band-aids. I have a massive 2-hour video actually coming out probably sometime this month or next month that's specifically about Monero. The 31 million donation to Ross Ulbricht will remain mystery, wrapped in speculation. But what's not a mystery is that whoever sent it left a permanent trail on blockchain's transparent blockchain using the worst possible mixing service and gave blockchain analysis companies years worth of data to eventually figure out their identity. And it's basically kind of a masterclass on how not to move cryptocurrency privately. The blockchain remembers everything. So choose your tools accordingly. In any case, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.